What's the most petty thing a neighbor has done to you? Stole the windshield wipers off of my car. I caught him on a security camera stealing them one night. Next day I went over to his house and told that some lowlife stole my damn wipers. The look he gave me was priceless. Don't think he liked me calling him a lowlife. After I told him I had him on video, he goes, "Fine, take them back," and that was the last time I spoke to him. That's so weird. Who would want used wipers? They aren't even expensive. You should have asked, "Can you please return my wipers after using them?" A dorm neighbor was a huge dick and didn't care for anyone in the suite. So he did something like tip over his subwoofer, turn the music up and left for the weekend. The entire crew could feel it from our beds. I guess he didn't know that RAs have keys to the rooms. Maybe he also didn't know that you could get ejected from dorms. Fuck you, Bosco. You turd. A roommate did this during midterms in college with an annoying video clip. She set it to loop for 14 hours at max volume on her laptop and hooked up speakers before leaving for the day. She'd locked it so I couldn't turn the noise off. She'd even thought to do something to disable the power button. So I pulled the battery out, waited 10 seconds, and put it back in. Blissful silence. Unfortunately, there was a lot of unsaved work on that laptop. I'm still stunned someone would plan to leave their classwork for 16+ hours without saving it, but would think to change the power key to make it harder to stop the noise. She was randomly assigned and the only person I've ever known who has had their co-workers stage a surprise intervention at their home to ask them why they were such an asshole and how bold this change. It was seriously 15 people all trying to figure out how to get her to stop being so indiscriminately nasty. My college roommate left his subwoofer blaring 24/7 without actually hating his neighbors. I wonder which is worse. I had a neighbor, who I had never met, continue to throw dead animal carcasses in my yard. This went on for several months. Rabbit. Possum. Squirrel. Raccoon. You name it. One day, I witnessed him doing it, and this was how I determined who was actually performing this strange act. He was probably in his 60s. He opened his garage door, walked out with a pitchfork and something dead on it, then proceeded to yuck it in my front lawn. I waited until at night, picked it up and hurled it onto his car's windshield. He never did it again. My other neighbor, who I eventually met, said he had some feud with the previous owner of my house. I guess he never realized I wasn't the guy he feuded with. I had an asshole neighbor who would skim the dead bugs, dead frogs, and debris from his pool and dump them in my yard. I found out when I had a tap 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 noise and looked over to see him reaching his pool skimmer over his fence to knock the rotting stuff into my yard. So later, when I found dog crap in my yard, I picked it up with a shovel and yeeted it over the fence into his pool. Where did he get them? 2 years ago, my husband and I had just bought our first house. I was so excited to finally have flower beds, so I bought 5 purple tiger rose bushes and went out every day to tend to them. Our next door neighbor came over one day while I was watering my roses and decided to be a creeper. Asked if he could give me his number, started asking probing questions about my schedule, like how long I was home alone, and kept hitting on me. I turned off the water and went inside, locked the door and called my husband, because now there's a strange man walking through my yard that knows I'm home alone and won't accept my boundaries. My husband came home and met the neighbor's wife in the driveway to explain what happened and how the guy was out of line. Didn't see the guy again, but within days my roses started to shrivel up and die. I tried everything, but I'm pretty sure he sprayed them with plant killer. Calm as a bitch though, because he got fired for sexually harassing a customer shortly after, and his wife booted him out of the house. That sucks so much about your roses. Unfortunately, there isn't much you can do about it, especially if you didn't know. If the tops had been sprayed but not the bottom, you can try and cut it in half before the weed killer is in the roots. Depends on the type though. What a cunt. At least your story had a good ending, lol. Stole my trash bin because theirs got repossessed for lack of payment. Dumbasses thought I wouldn't know it was them. Trash collection company took my old trash bin away from them, gave me a brand new one, and gave me a credit for having to deal with all this bullshit. Who gets a trash can repossessed? Lamau. Our neighbors constantly complained for like 2 years about a tree in the backyard that looked like it was going to fall. They threatened to sue us if it did. Thing is, the tree was clearly on their property. Like by 5 feet. Then one day during a strong storm, a huge, seemingly strong and healthy tree, smack dab in the middle of their front yard, blows over onto their house. We went over the next day and helped them cut it up and remove it. They could barely make eye contact with us and never said thank you. They did shut up about the other tree though, that's still standing to this day. Sometimes it's those old gnarled, almost seeming about to fall trees that will say fuck you storms and stay standing until the end times. They also tend to have a stronger, more diverse root system compared to younger trees. If the front yard tree was newer, as in planted after the land was shaped and the other tree was there beforehand, it would also affect the rooting of the tree that fell due to grading of land and so forth, I would imagine. At my place I'd be afraid to plant a tree in my backyard as you dig maybe 6 inches down and are in hardpan. Lived in a neighborhood for about a year that was also home to one of the city council members. This bitch would send notices to everyone for anything she didn't like, and she'd try and sway the council to crack down on those she deemed the worst offenders. We earned a spot at the top of her shit list because we put our garbage cans at the curb in the afternoon rather than the evening. None of us were going out after dark and dealing with rats springing out of the cans like tiny, flea-ridden missiles. We didn't stop because legally, we weren't doing anything wrong. She was a stickler for making the neighborhood look fabulous even though most of the houses were in shitty condition, and as mentioned earlier, the entire city had, probably still has, a really bad rat problem. So every week, we'd get a new notice from her, though she always tried to say it was from the council as a collective. Yes, she hand-delivered that shit. Are you in Baltimore? We take a sick sort of pride in our city kitties. Rats are also the reason I don't set foot off the porch after dark. I was at this neighborhood treasure hunt when I was around 11. It was in a big park with a lot of trees and rocks, parking lot and a community center next to it. Me and my neighbor's kid both figured out final clue and sprinted towards the finish, only for me to accidentally bumped by his dad and fall. Still salty about it till this day. What a dick. Meanwhile, at a Pinewood derby, we ran into a guy who was having problems with his car and offered to let him use our GFite to lube the wheels on his car. They ended up beating us in the final race and offered us the first place trophy because they wouldn't have won if we hadn't helped. We declined the trophy, and were happy they won. We had our lot assessed and they put stakes in the ground on the property line. She pulled them up and moved them 2 inches over. It was very noticeable because they also made a small spray-painted line along the stakes. I guess she didn't think we would notice that the stakes were no longer on the line. We had a neighbor who apparently couldn't see a straight line between 2 points. No, sorry, that tree is one corner of our lot while that bush is another. Why is your garden in my fucking lawn? We just moved a month ago and plan to put in a fence for our dogs, so we'll have to have the property lines surveyed. I'm very interested in the results because when the next door neighbor introduced herself, she glanced over at a pile of their old fencing which is pretty clearly in our yard and said something about the property line jogging over in that part of the yard. Also told us everyone in the neighborhood bow hunts on everyone's backwooded acreage in the autumn. Gee, thanks for letting me know so we don't get shot walking our dogs on our own property. Growing up, we had a neighbor with an immaculate lawn and home. He kept it that way by flicking his cigarette butts over the fence and into our yard. To him, we were just white trash. One day, my mom picked up all the butts from our yard and flung them back into his yard. Problem solved. He never did it again. My dad bought an investment property and the neighbor did this with his dog shit. My dad would routinely fling it back over into his yard. One day the guy had a fit and flung the shit at our kitchen window. He went out, came home to all the dog shit and a carcass of a squirrel his dog killed on his patio. Never did it again. But he did plug the culvert on his property which flooded ours. What an ass. Subscribe for more hot Reddit takes in your inbox, guaranteed.